Hello friends and followers. This video is going to be specific on the topic of losing weight as opposed to disease reversal, and why I think a mostly fruit diet is the best and most efficient way to lose weight. So there's going to be two main points that I'm going to touch on: the principle of gluconeogenesis and bowel transit time of the foods that we eat. So I'll start with the bowel transit time. So that's probably the one that you're going to be able to pick up the most easy. And that makes sense when I use the metaphors that I'm going to use. So it's pretty self-explanatory. What are the foods that you're eating and how fast are they traveling through your system? From this hole to the one downstairs. That's what it's all about. If the foods that you're eating are moving too slowly, or you're combining the foods incorrectly, then it causes a blockage, fermentation, putrefaction, and then weight gain. There's also the endocrine system, which plays a role, especially your adrenals and your sugar metabolism, your parathyroids. You have two on each side, as well as your two thyroids. They're responsible for calcium utilization. But your adrenals and kidneys are the big one when it comes to sugar metabolism, and then that's when you see symptoms of diabetes and type 1, type 2, things of that nature. Type 1's more of a neurological issue, but type 2 is something that you can obviously develop over time, and you can also undevelop or reverse. But for the purposes of weight loss, we want to be eating the most hydrating foods possible, which in my estimation, and if you look at nature, is the fruits, which are carbohydrate rich. And if we look at the last part of that word, hydrate, it's pretty clear to see why they work so well for our anatomy. So the more hydrating the food, the less burden it's going to put on our digestive system, the more energy we're going to be able to extract from it, because it's cleaning our GI tract and everything else as it moves through. It doesn't create a mucousy residue and clog up all the villi, which are like the little absorptive fingers in our small intestine. Whereas things like rice, the starches, the meats, all the acidic stuff causes fermentation, putrefaction, as I said. If you've ever made paper mache or rice glue, you know what I'm talking about. That's exactly what's happening inside of your body. We need this area to be clean and able to absorb the foods. We don't want sulfur buildup, which is also a major cause of malabsorption, which can happen on any diet. It's not just a fruitarian thing. You can see people who are underweight on any sort of diet. So it's more of a genetic or hereditary thing, because the truth is genetics can be reversed and your destiny can be changed. It doesn't have to come down to what you were born with. You can change it. So once you start to clean that out and eat the foods that are the fastest digesting and yield the highest energy, that's when you can start actually putting on weight. But it's not just an instantaneous thing. It's not a panacea either, but if you go after it hard enough, you will lose weight, and then over time you'll start to put it back on without changing anything. These things take time, just as it took time for you to manifest symptoms of disease and sickness. It's going to take time to reverse. If you've spent years putting on weight or yo-yo dieting, things of that nature, or you're maybe middle-aged and you're starting to get a pot belly, maybe your knees are starting to hurt, things like that, then that's what I'm talking about. Everything takes time. So focus on the quickest digesting foods. They're going to help you lose weight because, for two reasons, you're able to use the nutrition with less food. It's more about nutrients and minerals than it is about calories. So there's less physical mass inside of you. That's really what the pot belly or the beer belly is. It's just built up meals. The average Westerner, depending on who you listen to, has 12 to 15 meals backed up inside of them. I know the Americans say if you're eating a Western diet, when you get an autopsy, most Westerners have around 35 pounds of undigested meat inside of their GI tract. So make of that what you will. It doesn't sound too healthy to me. There shouldn't be that much matter inside of us, and it's clear to see most people don't look healthy because they're combining all these foods together. So food combining is another thing I'll quickly touch on. The biggest sin, I think, is combining the heavy starches with the proteins. That's when you really start to see malabsorption and the ballooning of the gut and intestines, because the starch, as you know, turns to a glue, and the protein is highly acidic when it's tried to be broken down by the stomach and the other intestinal enzymes, and then that gets glued onto the small intestine where the villi are, trying to absorb stuff, and it's basically just caking this layer on the area that we're supposed to be getting our energy through. So over time, the small intestine balloons out. In nature, or naturally, it's supposed to only be about a diameter of 1 inch. I've seen pictures of people with small intestines 10 to 12 inches in diameter. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how far wrong we've stepped as a species when it comes to diet. So gluconeogenesis, this is something you may not have heard of. It's something that's quite understood, and it's similar to ketosis, which everyone seems to know about because it's now being popularized by science and the media. But they're two separate things and people get them confused. So ketosis is absolutely only a backup system, but it's what people think is going on as soon as you run out of carbohydrates, and why they think the ketogenic diet works so well. I don't believe that's the case. I think gluconeogenesis is playing a bigger role. When we're mostly sedentary and we're not doing much activity, 60% of our energy is coming from fat and 40% from carbs. So our body wants to use the carbs in reserve because it's a more efficient burning fuel, because it's harder to come by and we store fat more easily. And we're going to use it for more explosive activities if we have to run or jump or enter a fight or flight situation as opposed to a rest and digest. So it's going to use the fats in like your zone 2 type training. You maybe got a light sweat, you're going for a walk, you're working on the computer, watching TV, whatever. We have what's known as a carbohydrate fuel tank, which is basically our liver and our muscles. This is where we store the majority of our glycogen in the body. So once the liver and the muscles run out, that's when we would go into a state of ketosis, which is an emergency system. Once the body runs out of glycogen or carbohydrates, the body will actually start going after lean tissue, because lean tissue, again, burns better than fat more efficiently over a longer term when we don't have that, say, 60-40 split to kind of supplement it. So that's why you see over time, if you do a water fast, you're not just losing fat, you're losing, well, water weight for one, you're losing fat, but mostly lean tissue. If you do a DEXA scan before and after, you can clearly see this. So the aim of the game, and why eating high carbohydrates or fruits, simple sugars, long term should be the goal, is because every time you eat, you're topping up that carbohydrate fuel tank, which is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 calories if we're going to use that measurement. It varies slightly for everyone, but that's a rough estimate for a male. So every time you top that off, you're basically protecting your lean tissue. And every time you dip below that, then it's going to start going after lean tissue. Now, if we look at the carnivore diet quickly, or the keto diet, you can actually see that 58% of dietary protein can be used towards gluconeogenesis. And what gluconeogenesis actually is the conversion of proteins to carbohydrates. This also works a tiny bit with the fats, but it's mostly proteins. The body can only use a certain amount of protein, and it only needs a certain amount to keep the cell structures alive. It's your cabin walls, so to speak. You don't use the cabin walls for energy. You use the firewood or the carbohydrates in the fireplace. You don't burn the house down. That's where people get it mixed up. We don't use protein for energy. We use the sugar that it's converted into. So over time, I believe, if you do the carnivore long enough, for one, you're going to become underweight and it's going to start pulling calcium. A lot of the bodybuilders are now struggling, if you look at them, with rheumatoid arthritis is a big one. Loss of muscle mass. They're pulling calcium, they're pulling all these minerals out of the bones and whatnot. They're in pain because of the acidosis, and there's not enough carbohydrate to keep everything moving and flowing. We need the lymph flow, and we need the carbohydrates. I just wanted to add this quick segment on the gluconeogenesis topic. I forgot to mention it before, but it's around the animal-based diets and why they seem to go so well, why they have a high relative amount of muscle mass and they're quite lean. So as I said, 58% of dietary protein can be used for gluconeogenesis, or conversion into carbohydrates, which are essential to life. The brain cannot use any other fuel than fructose, which is derived from glucose, which can be derived from protein. So the carbohydrate fuel tank is never getting depleted when you're eating high amounts of protein, because it can be converted into carbohydrate. Because they're not actually getting in real carbohydrates, then they become extremely lean because there's not a lot of water being stored. On the flip side, over time, I don't believe this is healthy. We know that it pulls calcium out of the bones, muscles, connective tissue. As I said, with the bodybuilders, I don't know a lot of them that have done well after they've retired physically. You can look at Carly Muscle or Ben Cowell. He's an Australian bodybuilder who was Australian champion about 6 years ago. High proteins, and just completely destroyed his body. Now he's gone the other way. He's healed himself with a high fruit, berry and melon diet. But that's just a little bit about gluconeogenesis and the conversion of proteins to carbs, and why you can almost stave off the detrimental aspects, because you're using the protein of another animal from your diet to stop your body going after its own lean tissue. So when the focus becomes hydration from foods as opposed to calories, there's no way you won't be able to lose weight. Try it for a week and let me know, because I highly doubt you won't see any results. It's almost impossible, because you're getting the hydration without the bulk of the foods. You're moving stuff through. You'll have all of the energy without having to eat the density of foods. on the flip side of that, you will have to eat more volume. That's one thing I think a lot of raw foodists struggle with. They don't eat the volume that they used to because the calories aren't there. Which, if you like eating, then it's the perfect diet. So I feel you're going to find out pretty quick if you actually like eating or not when you switch to a more alkaline, nature-based diet. A lot of the time, I think you'll find that you like eating certain foods that make you feel good, but you don't actually like eating the volume if it's something that's maybe not to your taste. But over time, you'll get used to it. I know a lot of people, including myself, who have changed their taste buds, so to speak, their palate. Different foods come and go. They serve us sometimes. They didn't in the past, now they do, and vice versa. So it's all about being intuitive and listening to your body. Go find some fruits and vegetables that speak to your senses and just go to town on it. So that's a little bit about weight loss, gluconeogenesis, bowel transit time. Keep it moving, keep it hydrating, and see how you go. So if you want some help with losing weight or reversing disease or illness, you can book a free consultation call with me in the link in my bio or in the description. If you want to grab my free ebook on the 3 keys to true health, you can also get that there. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.